Everybody, to be with you on a Tuesday. It's pretty much rinse and repeat when it comes to what's going on with the ACC. It looks like they're going to meet, could be meeting tonight. Unfortunately, yesterday they met for a brief period of time in North Carolina, and there was a problem there. A person was killed, which is terrible, and it postponed the meeting, which of course it should. And so we expect that that's going to happen today, and we'll find out soon enough how those votes go down. And Justin, it's good to see you. I don't think the ACC president scheduled a meeting without expecting. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. You don't expect, you don't call a meeting if you don't have the votes. I mean, that would just be embarrassing. And I don't think that that's what they want to do. I'll give you a hint on the first when the Big Ten voted to bring in USC and UCLA. The first couple of votes was they had coming up to that vote. We're talking about maybe a week or so before. Kept USC, and it was USC and it was Stanford, ironically. And the rationale behind that made some sense, and that was that both of those schools, being Western schools, but private schools, would be less, difficult to necessarily move because they both also had, very long histories with playing against Big Ten teams. So that was the first, idea was, okay, we get LA, we get San Francisco, so we get two top 10 markets, and we get two, brands that are, that are definitely aligned with the league. But then it was decided that maybe we just take both teams out of Los Angeles, and that's where they went. So when that was done, that was a unanimous vote. Obviously, prior to that, that was not a unanimous vote. We've known they've held a straw poll, so they haven't even really had an official vote of any sort yet. So this, if they go to a vote today or sometime today, then that will be technically the first official vote they've had. So they'll take a lot of straw, votes in the back, which, as I said before, those are not actual votes. Those are just, getting an opinion on something. So yeah, Justin, I think you're 100% right there. They're not going to come in there and do a vote without enough votes to get it passed, and that would be silly. And so, I think that that's where they're going with it. So we'll find out. Immaculate, good to see you. By the way, you were great on Kuz's show. I just enjoy Kuz and what he's doing, and did an outstanding job on the show last night, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I watched it this morning. So you, my friend, are becoming a star, which is great. We'll have to get you over here and have you as a guest, because you lend a lot to the conversation. So from that standpoint, we were just talking about the ACC probably not calling a vote if they don't have the votes. And I mentioned that the situation with the Big Ten, when they went through their circumstance, they actually, the first vote that they had, again, it was a straw vote, was ironically Stanford and USC, because they're both private institutions. They didn't think they would have any problem, putting them on. So, but that ended up being UCLA instead of Stanford. So there's that, which is why I guess Stanford is here today trying to get the ACC to back them, is because they have an urgent need to be somewhere where it's a Power 5 conference, and so the ACC, comes to that. One of the reasons that Cal can take a lesser, I just had a question on Twitter, how come Cal can take a lesser amount than a full share? Remember, I don't know if you'll remember this, but part of the deal that allowed UCLA out of the system was what was called calimony. And that was where UCLA had agreed to pay, I believe it's an escalating amount, but it starts, I believe, anywhere from $2 to $5 million and caps off at $10 million a year from the money made by UCLA in the Big Ten. So there's the Calamoni payment goes all the way through the first term of that contract. So once the contract's up, well, then they don't get Calamoni anymore, but they will, they'll get some cash. And we all know that depending upon who you're talking about, Stanford and Cal will take the lesser amount, and then SMU will either forego money for 7, and I've heard as much as 9 years. I don't think that would be the case. I think 7 years probably that would be something that they might entertain, but I don't think more than that. That's cruel and unusual punishment. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen from that standpoint. We're gonna have some fun this week. I've got Gary Danielson, Todd Blackledge, a couple of other college announcers who are going to be. We're going to be doing some interviews with them and posting them from that standpoint. Todd's going to be on the NBC Saturday night deal. Oh, you did pull double duty last time. Okay, well, I hope you get overtime for that. That would be good. And I hope the weather out in Scottsdale's okay today, not too hot. For Blackledge, I mean, it's kind of a homecoming. He, of course, started Penn State, and ironically was there at the same time. They're playing West Virginia when Jeff Hostetler. He and Jeff came in on the same class at Penn State. It was clear that Blackledge was going to get the job. Hostetler transferred to West Virginia and had a fine college career. Both of them went on to the pros, and actually Hostetler had a better professional career than Todd did. But Todd's been in the broadcast business now for, oh my goodness, almost 4 decades. So he's seen it all, and I think that him being matched up with Eagle, Eagle is going to be good. He's Ian's son, and he's a good broadcaster. So we'll see those two guys on the Saturday game on NBC, which is, of course, as I said before, West Virginia and Penn State at Happy Valley. And those two schools used to play a lot back in the day, So we'll see. All right. I woke up a little earlier this morning in hopes that the ACC had made some kind of announcement to have a meeting today. Without that, not much chance for movement in the college football meeting tomorrow. Probably not. It's conceivable that the ACC could have a meeting today and announce something. It's the CFP meeting tomorrow becomes important, and we'll see how that plays out, because that they're going to talk about the playoffs, and they're going to talk about the playoff berths and how many there are and who gets them and all that. So it's not like the ACC won't be in the meeting; they will, but it would be nice to be able to say that they've added on those 3 schools, because right now they were the only conference of the group that didn't add teams. Now, obviously, the Pac lost all their teams, all but 2. So we'll see. We will absolutely see how that plays out. At this point in time, I think it's going to be crucial for that kind of thing to happen. It's silly not to just add them. It makes no sense, because they're, in the long run, it will pay off. In the short run, it's not going to pay off, but in the long run, absolutely. Hey, Jerry, how you doing? Do you think the biggest upset in week 1? Michigan has had a history of getting out of the gate a little, less than perfect. So I'm going to go with East Carolina, and East Carolina maybe sneaking up there and beating Michigan at Big House. Carolina's had some good football teams, and they don't mind going on the road. Remember App State beating Michigan at the Big House a few years ago. So um, let's see that I'm going to go with East Carolina taking over and beating Michigan at the Big House. What do you think, Jerry? What do you guys think? Who's going to be your big winner this week? UNC Chancellor has been very busy. He's been briefing local TV news here in North Carolina campus, which, of course, I mean, this is that terrible situation happened yesterday in Charlotte. I'm sorry, in Charlotte. I apologize. In Chapel Hill, overrides anything. Um, you know, it's more important that he take care of what's going on campus than onboarding three teams. So yeah, they could take the vote. By the way, he could send a proxy to Phillips if he wanted to. They could do it that way. But I imagine he wants to be on record. So yeah. Maybe it's Friday. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think it's a foregone conclusion that the three teams are going to be on there. But we'll see. But that's a good point, Justin. Okay. And definitely understand if we don't move the say till the end of the week, maybe even next week. Got the hurricane coming as well. Yeah, I actually just spoke to some people down in that area, in the Tallahassee area, and they're wondering and hoping that the hurricane takes a little bit of a right turn. Now, that's okay with if you're in Tallahassee, but if it takes a right turn, that means it's headed for Gainesville. So there's a lot of land, a lot of people out there that I hope are being safe and being prudent, and if they can get out of the way of the hurricane, that would be a very good idea. And now would be the time to start moving, because it's supposed to hit land sometime tomorrow evening, so the bands and the rain will begin tonight. So no more of my weather report, but the fact of the matter is, yeah, there's a hurricane coming, and that could affect FSU. I don't think it's not going to change FSU's vote from a yes to a no, but we'll see. We'll see. By the way, we'll see if it's. We talked about this before, if it was unanimous or not unanimous. We'll see how that all plays out. But I think that if it's not done today, it will definitely be done by the end of the week. I don't think they want to go into football games on Saturday with the number one thing that they're being asked is, are you onboarding Stanford, Cal, and SMU? I don't think they want to get into those conversations at all. Still interesting on what's going to happen with, Oregon State and Washington State. They have been wooed quite heavily by the Mountain West and Gloria Nevarez, who is the very competent and very aggressive, which in a good way, commissioner of the Mountain West Conference has had her conversations with the two universities. I'm quite certain that Michael Resco and the American will also have extensive conversations with the two, and we shall see how that plays out. Both of them are very good and passionate about selling their conferences, and we will see if Oregon State and Washington State make a move to one of those two conferences, downgrade to a Power Five situation, which at the end of the day may not be a bad thing for them, but it's going to take a toll on the academic. I'm sorry, not on the academic side, but on the athletic side, because the budget's not going to be there to do a lot of things. They may have to cut. They're certainly going to have to cut staff. They may have to cut some of their sports. So through no fault of their own, Oregon State and Washington State are suffering for a bad situation in this regard. So we'll see how that plays out. I've heard some people talking about the Big 12 getting involved with what was the Pac-12 network. That may not be such a good idea because their partners are Fox and ESPN. ESPN offered, as did Fox, to take over the network. The network now belongs obviously to the Pac-12. They would have to purchase the Pac-12 network. I'm talking about either ESPN or Fox would have to purchase it. It doesn't. If I'm ESPN, I really don't need it, right? Because if I want to make a Big 12 network, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it through ESPN Plus. So there's no need to do that. If I'm Fox, I haven't done any streaming at all. Okay, so and they're not necessarily into the streaming business. They don't stream the Big Ten network. Okay, so considering that the Big Ten network, I'm sorry, the Pac-12 network owes Comcast $50 million, I don't think that it necessarily is a wise thing to try to figure out how to do that. Now, selling the network, selling the actual physical portion of the network makes a lot of sense. And whether it's to ESPN, whether it's to Fox, whether it's to Apple or to whomever, it makes sense because it is a viable production house which has fantastically talented crews that do good work. And I think anybody who saw the San Jose State game and USC this week saw that they had a very good group of folks. So talent-wise, they're very good. They were mismanaged, and that's that was a problem. And had they left ESPN or Fox still owned the network or part of the network, I think they wouldn't have been in the problem that they had, and they may very well even still be together. But that's revisionist history, and we're not there yet. So yeah, I think if the Big 12 wants a network, which I don't know that they do, but if they did, I'm certain that ESPN would get involved. Now, interesting thing from Front Office Sports, and that was that in 2025, which is the kind of target date when ESPN will offload all of their content to the ESPN Plus platform. Now, that's not to say they will leave cable, they won't, but everything that's on cable will then be transferred over to ESPN Plus, where you can watch it on ESPN on your traditional cable situation. The price point for that is estimated to be either somewhere between $25 and $35 a month. That's a lot of money for just what they've got going there. So keep an eye on that. That's as I said before, that's a pretty high price to pay for. Granted, you get a lot of sports on it, but that's that I think going from $5.95 to $20, $25, $35 is going to be a sticker shock to a lot of people. So keep an eye out for that. And as they move forward, I know they have to make money, but that's I don't know how many people are willing to pay for that kind of situation. We will see. The other stuff that's going on, I think that with the college football group meeting tomorrow, I think there's a lot of backroom conversations as to how this is going to play out. I don't think it's going to play out where the group of five is left out of this, in any shape or form. I think they want that to be, one of the beauties of NCAA March Madness is you got Cinderella teams. Well, in this particular case, you could have a Cinderella team coming from one of these conferences that could do very well in the tournament. So I think they realize that there is an interest in definitely wanting to make that work. It's something a little bit more interesting from that standpoint. Idea, if it would be better done to ESPN, then so be it. Really wanted to see a road for, I think that's a very good point. I, I, I honestly believe that there is now a concern in the Big 12. Getting Oregon State and Washington State into the Big 12 makes sense on a lot of levels. Okay. Certainly when you onboard Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, adding these two is not a bad idea. The problem to me is what if, I mean, you've got UCF, you've got Cincinnati, you've got West Virginia, all miles away from all of that. You become more of a West Coast and Midwest conference, and so it really means that you're going to have to backfill on the East Coast side because right now West Virginia is paying anywhere between $4 and $6 million a year in travel. That's unsustainable. And with regard to Florida, Central Florida, they're going to have a hefty chunk of travel as well. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think otherwise, Oregon State and Washington State would be in the Big 12, and in the future they may be. They may be. They may have to go down for a couple of years, only to get brought back. So I don't know, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Fox is not going to pay any more money, okay, in pro rata. ESPN probably is not crazy about that, although if they wanted to do the Pac-12 After Dark, which it would now be the Big 12 After Dark, it seemed like Oregon State and Washington State had a lot of those games when they were on ESPN. So we'll have to see what that's like. Honestly, I feel badly for Oregon State and Washington State. So we'll see. But from a television standpoint, I think they're going to I would like to see them be able to land in the Big 12, but those conversations haven't happened. So we'll have to see. And as I said, I think they're going to start looking at, they meaning the conference, the Big 12, is going to have to start looking east because there's way too much now in the Midwest and the Southwest and the Central and the Mountain and the Pacific time zones that leaves them in a position where they're very vulnerable on the east flank. If you're going to be a quote unquote national conference, fine. Give me more than three teams more than three teams, two teams if you don't count Cincinnati as an East Coast team, which it's not. It's really more central located. Hey Harlan, how you doing? What was with the Cal Stanford info on Saturday? To Big 12. Okay, let me talk about that for a minute. Steve Silver, who's a very good writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, wrote a piece saying that Stanford had gotten in touch with a Big 12 representative to talk about the possibility that if things didn't go well in this coming week with the ACC, would there be interest in talking about some sort of way of working together, or even bringing on all four of the remaining Pac-12 teams. Okay. Now that's set out there for 6 hours. At 6 hours into that, and then it started populating. You would see Silver's article was being then removed into Sports Illustrated, and then it went to Bleacher Report. Then it went to the Associated Press. Then it went to like 7 or 8 different, and we're talking about mainstream media sites now. We're not talking about folks who have a vested interest one way or the other. And it took 20 hours before Brett McMurphy and then Dennis Dodd of CBS reported that no, the Big 12 did not have those conversations. I don't believe that personally. I don't believe that they didn't have a conversation. Now, did they have a conversation on a lower level? I believe that's where it was. I believe it was a lower level thing of an ask. I can guarantee you, and I know that some Big 12 fans are going to be upset, but I'm not here to upset anybody. I guarantee you that if Stanford calls the Big 12 to talk about something that they may be able to do together, the Big 12 would be insane if they didn't at least answer the phone, at least have a conversation. Now, that's not to say Stanford would ask for an invitation or Cal, or they're basically a conversation about those four schools would be reasonable for the Big 12 to talk to. And not that they would bring one now. Remember that the conference has 2 more years to reinvent themselves. So there's money, there's a bit of money left in the Pac-12. So I think that in a fallback position, could I see Stanford making a phone call to the Big 12 and gauging interest on not just what happens today, but perhaps happens in the future? I can see that. Can I see that for that entire day on Saturday, that not a single member of the Big 12 refuted anything until Sunday? Because that floated out there, as I said, almost 20 hours. So I do believe, and Steve Silver is a solid reporter. He's not, I've seen people come and go, well, it was something that they meaning Stanford, planted so that they could use it as leverage to the ACC. Look, the San Francisco Chronicle, like any big and reputable newspaper, is not going to be used for Stanford or Cal or anybody in the Bay Area to basically be a propaganda machine. That's not their job. Steve Silver's understands what he's doing. So to your point, I think someone at Stanford picked up the phone and said, "Hey, look, we are talking to the ACC, as you know, but let's play what if? What if we were interested in conversations about entering, the Big 12? Is that something we could talk about?" And as I said before, I don't see anywhere, shape, or form that the Big 12 wouldn't at least have conversations. Conversation is just that. It's conversation. It's not any commitment. It wasn't ever reported as a commitment. It was reported as a conversation that could potentially lead somewhere. Well, so that's where I think it was. I think they did make a phone call. I think it was answered. I think that they had a little bit of a dialogue about it, and that was it. So could it lead? Would I be surprised if something fell through on the ACC deal and Stanford would approach the Big 12? No, it wouldn't surprise me. Is it likely? No, because I think the ACC is going to go ahead and do it. But what happened on Saturday was, I believe, was a legitimate phone call from Stanford to a Big Ten representative. Did they call Brett Yormark? Probably not. Those things are handled on a much lower level, at this point in time. So I think that that's where it was. It was a low-level conversation about what ifs, and because there's no other reason. I mean, there's no reason for the Chronicle to put out something that, in essence, is just going to embarrass them at a later date. So I think that's where it was, and the denials. Every conference is denied. Going and talking to schools or going and talking to networks, presence, wherever. So it's a non-denial denial in my mind. They're basically saying, well, we didn't talk to them, or we didn't initiate a conversation, or we never spoke to them. Fine, whatever you want. I still don't believe it. I believe that the Big 12 had a conversation, and it doesn't cost anything to have a conversation. So there you go. That's what I think happened on Saturday. Because, as I said before, the key to me was it took too darn long to get somebody to refute it. And so there you go. That's what I think happened on the weekend in that particular situation. Do I see them going in there? We'll see. I mean, it would have to be because the ACC doesn't do it. And right now, I think all the momentum is pushing in that direction. And I know Florida State, Clemson, and all the rest of them, of the four who, are getting there. I think that at least one, maybe even two of them are going to flip in this case. It might be North Carolina, and it might be North Carolina State. They may say, you know what? Okay, cool. Well, let's bring them in, because at the end of the day, a little bit of money is better than no money. And even though they're talking about it, and I think the long-term plan is get through this contract. I think that's the key. Get through the contract. Get through the contract. Situation and what may or may not happen in the future. Let's let that play out, because what we're looking at right now is way different than the college football landscape post 2030 is going to look like, which is probably more like an NFL format. So we'll see. We totally will see how that plays out at this point. It's a little bit crazy, but it's a little bit fun. Hang on one quick second. Just please bear with me for a moment. Immaculate, I'm sending you an invite. If you want to jump on, feel free like that. I know you had some conversations with Kuz last night that might be of interest. So there's your invitation to join me if you have a moment. We'd enjoy having you chat on what you spoke about last night with Kuz, because I agree with you that this is not a short play long deal. Stanford, Cal, and SMU are looking to play the long game and not the short game. And I think that's where things are at this point. You take Stanford, you take Cal, you take SMU, in case you lose playing people. In case you lose an FSU or Clemson or Carolina or any number of potentials out there. So I think that's something that we're going to have to look into. But it is what it is, right? I mean, we're going to have some fun watching it, but I'm actually also more concerned about watching football. I would like to actually watch some good old-fashioned football for a while. That would be a lot more fun. So, it's coming this week. We kick it off on Thursday night. Surprisingly, there's like 25 games on Thursday night, then there's 5 on Friday night, then there's a slew of games on Saturday, some on Sunday, and then there's a Monday game. So we got, if you miss college football, by the time Labor Day evening is over, you will not have missed it. It's all there. So by all means, enjoy it and have fun with it. So Immaculate, if you want to join, I sent you the clip there, buddy. Just smash it and drop on. If not, we'll chat with you another time. But I did want to chat with you about what we were talking about on the future aspect of it. But there we go. Anyway, let's see what else is going on. Couple quick soccer and other notes. Lionel Messi just seems to be tearing things up here. Who was it for? It was for you. Yeah, all you have to do is hit on it, Immaculate, and it'll bring you right into the studio. So go ahead and click on the thing that's under my name or Capital Sports Network. Either one will get you to where you need to be. So Messi's having a great time. He scored in every game he's played so far. Red Bull is where they played on Saturday night, and he scored a late goal there. It was ironic because he actually didn't get into the game until the second half because they set him out and gave him a rest. but he did have a great goal toward the end of that. So that seems to be paying off quite well. You know, we'll see. Quick question here from Harlan. Hey, Harlan, how many seats do you think are left at the P2 for the SEC in the Big Ten? I tend to believe Greg Sankey and the SEC that they don't want to go out of their footprint. Okay, so what does that mean? That would mean to me that they would be happy. Here we go. Mac, you'll put him in here. How you doing?
Good. Good morning.
Good morning. We're just Harlan had asked about how many seats are left in the SEC and the Big Ten. I'm not one of those who believes the SEC wants to go, large. I'm thinking with them, they've always looked at North Carolina, they've always looked at Virginia as potentials. Florida State was invited and chose not to come in '94, and that was understandable because they went to the ACC and it paid off really well for them. Could Florida State and Clemson end up there? Yeah, but I don't see. I mean, I don't see more than four total. I think would be the SEC would be fine, and everybody would be in their footprint because they could onboard FSU, they could onboard Clemson and Carolina and Virginia and be happy with that. I think that would make them, that still stays within the footprint. As far as Virginia's maybe a little bit north from what normally you would think, but I don't see them going into the Midwest. I don't see them going, way north or anything like that. I mean, they're smart enough to know where it's been successful for them, and I don't think that they want to mess with that kind of situation. Because if you're looking at Arkansas, right? Arkansas is not far from Carolina, or it's not that far from Virginia, so you're not really pushing it, much further than that. So I think that's where, ironically, I think Georgia Tech and Miami. I know for a fact that Georgia Tech has been on their radar for a number of years. They would like to put a flag flat down in the middle of SEC country, figuring Atlanta would be, if they had a team in Atlanta, they could do things in Atlanta, and that would drive the SEC crazy, because that's where most of the time they have their major championships and all kinds of other things. So yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun. But I'll let you go because I know you have some thoughts on that.
Well, I agree with you largely about the SEC. The SEC has a certain element going for it in that it only has an 8-game conference schedule right now.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people to look at this, each new added game, and you could probably know more about this than I do, but each new added game is going to have a certain value to it. So one of the things I've kind of hypothesized is that one of the reasons for not expanding to the 9th game is they are saving that to use as a bargaining chip.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're going to do an expansion of 4 teams, you might see them use expansion up to 10 games as a bargaining chip to make sure that those 4 schools all get full payouts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with the 4 number. I do kind of see that maybe the Big Ten and SEC both only wanting to go to 20 in order to answer the question. Not that 20 is this hard cap that needs to be met. It just kind of makes sense that they don't want to go too fast. Big Ten has had so much growth lately that it kind of throws their internal balances off, and as far as the politics of the conference. So I could see 2 more. Florida State, Clemson. I like North Carolina State and Virginia Tech for the SEC. I think that they match the culture a little bit better. They care more about football. Their game day atmospheres are better than Virginia and North Carolina.
Yeah.
And the SEC, as much as they want to improve their academics, North Carolina State and Virginia Tech don't lower that. They do raise the bar. So that's kind of where I'm looking at for them. And then if the Big Ten can take North Carolina and Virginia right now, that'll probably be the play. Miami's a great one too, though. That could be part of it as well. I just think that the political.
Right. Yeah. Here's the thing that I was told by, I've spoken to folks I have at Michigan, at Penn State, at Ohio State, as well as in Maryland and Rutgers. Everybody, the reason the Big Ten likes Miami is the fan bases in Miami for the Big Ten.
Yes.
They've got massive, both donor groups as well as, folks who've retired to South Florida. And so, you could play a Penn State, you could play, I know, Ohio State, you could play a Michigan, and then sell a stadium, and there'd be more people there for Penn State than probably would be for Miami. So I think that they're looking at that. Plus, it gets them it gets them into the recruiting. Not that, and I always get this. I like your opinion on it. I always get this silliness of, well, they really want to be there for the recruiting, and it's like, well, they've been recruiting it for 50 years. So what's going to change that? Is adding Miami to their going to elevate their ability to recruit? No, that's for dollars and cents. Okay. The bigger market, it's as I said before, you can travel there. You've already got your your in-house group of 50,000 to 60,000 alumni in the greater Miami area. So you're not going to lose anything. It's a definite plus gain in that regard. And you're not going to have to build any concept of what the Big Ten is, because it's already embedded into the people that you live there. So that part of it, I don't think is the issue. And so I think the market and all that would be a good thing for the Big Ten. So I've always thought, okay, I can buy that one. Georgia Tech's a little bit more of a nuanced sell to me. I mean, I realize you want to stick it in the heart of an SEC country, but Georgia Tech's a fantastic academic university, but I don't know what else athletically it adds to that. But then you can make that same argument for Rutgers and Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, I do like those, and the talk on that, and Miami is definitely up there. Maybe a small setback for the Miami situation in terms of where it is in the priority. They have the plans that they wanted to do on a new stadium, and I think that would be big for them, very big for them in terms of realignment. Unfortunately, the man that was kind of at the center of that is now under a lot of scrutiny, as you are probably well aware of. So it kind of makes me wonder if maybe that had a slight cooling effect on Miami, just because of where they actually play football at there. In terms of that being what that adds, I would say that what that adds in recruiting is the ability for family of those recruits down there to know that they're going to have a better chance to see their kid without having to travel a long ways. So a little angle in recruiting, not a big deal. But like you're saying, they've been recruiting that. In terms of North Carolina and Virginia, why I favor that, it's more of a big picture thing. I think as much as no one will ever admit to it, there's going to have to be some level of collusion behind the scenes in order to get this whole situation resolved. And when you have North Carolina and Virginia politicians coming out saying, we are not going to allow these teams to be separated or whatever, I think what they mean is, we're not going to let one of these schools go on and have this bright future and the other one be left behind in a withered ACC. So I think that solves the political problem if Big Ten takes 2 and SEC takes 2 in those states.
I mean, it makes sense. I do recall back in when the Big East came apart. That's when the Virginia legislators, forced the ACC. And I say forced because I don't know that the ACC was looking very hard um, at Virginia Tech, only because at that time they wanted football, and Frank Beamer was there at that point, and there wasn't really much in the way of basketball at Virginia Tech at that time. So I think West Virginia probably got knocked off the list, and Virginia Tech got put in, and it was kind of a compromise. Okay,
Yep.
so fine, we're not crazy about taking Virginia Tech, but we'll take them because the last thing we want to do is drag this thing on with the Virginia legislature. So if this is what we got to do, this is what we got to do. And in the odd man out situation, which was sad, but West Virginia got left at the altar there, where it made a hell of a lot of sense for them just to add West Virginia and someone else, which along with Virginia Tech. But at the end of the day, that's not what happened, and so we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that those threats coming from the state of Virginia probably tend to have a little more weight than they do from other states, just due to their proximity to Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
The state level legislature there can tend to have a little more connection with the national level than some other states.
Well, and the chancellors and the board of regents are very focused on that.
Yeah.
And ironically, we know that Virginia has an absolutely amazing academic profile.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech is not that far behind.
No, in fact, to touch on that real quick and then keep going, they were at the top of the list of all the schools that were in the running for AAU in terms of research dollars. Them and NC State were at the very top, and they didn't get in of the schools being looked at. So yeah, they're no slouch.
Well, the P2, which is the basically this is what Q2. I'm sorry, we got football in the brain here from it. The Q2 situation, which is Amazon's, Northern Virginia campus, which is going to be their headquarters in the East. What happened was Virginia Tech. One of the things that they did is Virginia Tech had a very strong Northern Virginia campus in Alexandria, and they built that campus for one thing, and that was to bring their kids and their folks to Amazon for these high-paying jobs that Amazon's going to be opening up in the next couple of years in Northern Virginia on that campus. So already Virginia Tech has made a mark in the academic side, and now they're computer sciences and all the other business and all that goes with it is they'll become a feeder, just like Cal and Stanford became feeders to the tech center. And there's a huge tech center out there in Northern Virginia already, which is more than happy to hire every one of them. And so they've done all the right things academically as they moved along the way. And so I think that those people who have never been to Blacksburg, Virginia, couldn't find it on a map, would understand that, okay, this is a fun atmosphere for sports, but it's also now a very, robust academic institution as well. I think it gets overlooked in that regard.
Yeah, if the Big Ten is truly serious about trying to raise the level of its football, I could see them possibly making the decision to go with Virginia Tech and North Carolina State and letting the SEC take Virginia and North Carolina. I mean, it would throw off some norms of their realignment picks in the past where what they normally focus on. But it would certainly add to their Eastern footprint in terms of if you have like a Penn State, a Maryland, and a Rutgers, you got one big giant and a couple of, middle ground areas. I think bringing in Virginia Tech would certainly help with that.
Wouldn't hurt it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And, and I know that, there's been an off again, on again love affair between the Big Ten and Pitt. And I wouldn't be surprised that I don't, I think Pitt is not out of the realm of possibility for a landing spot in the Big Ten. Um, whether it's, I don't think it's 1 or 1B or any of that. I think that it's there. I think they know it's there, and I think that they would like to have an opportunity. But I think Pitt, Syracuse, Boston College, those schools are in that area, in that situation where you sit there going, they really, where do they fit? They're they could be the Big 12's Eastern block. They could be, some of them could be Big Ten. They're tweeners because there's areas that they fit and areas they don't fit. And I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that all goes. And that's assuming for the moment that the ACC falls apart, which there's no reason to actually feel that way. If they lose to Florida State and they lose to Clemson or North Carolina, I see that, but there may be, and let me just put it this way, I'll use that as a caveat. There may be some group of 5 schools that could begin to backfill in there that would not be that bad of a, let's call them growth stocks, growth stocks, which is what Bowlesby did when he brought in UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, right? And then, of course, BYU. 3 of them were growth stocks. BYU was already a brand, and so they didn't really have to prove themselves. Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston are going to have to prove their value to the conference, and I think they will. But that's the way it is. I don't know that had the ACC taken a look and decided, well, maybe it would have been wiser for us to, onboard some of these growth stock schools, would have been good. But, at this point in time, they're looking at Stanford, they're looking at Cal, and they're looking at SMU. And I think that's where it's going to stop for them, at least on this merry-go-round ride.
Well, on the 2 different subjects of the ACC and Pitt in particular, on the ACC, I kind of have a bit of a side theory on that. I don't know if we'll break that out here on your show just as of yet. It's a bit on the wild side.
Yeah,
I'd love to bring that to you in private to see what your thoughts are on it, though.
Sure, okay.
And then we can bring that forward. But I tend to think that there is some method to the madness going on there. I think anytime you're going to see the schools of Stanford and Duke come together, just as a little bit of a clue or an indicator there, I don't think it's done without something in mind.
No, you could have the first power. You could have the first power Ivy League conference.
That's where I was going, is the Ivy League.
You could have that, and Pitt would certainly fit that bill. Duke would fit that bill. Stanford and Cal, 100%. Certainly Syracuse could fit that bill. You could bring Boston College and UConn into it if you wanted to.
Wake Forest probably gets to stick around.
Yeah, Wake Forest would stick around.
GT.
Oh, no question about that. So you got that, and I think that I think Louisville will go to the Big 12. I thought Louisville would have gone to the Big 12 when they ended up in the ACC, but for whatever reason they didn't go in that direction. And
if the SEC and Big 10 both go to 22, I could see Louisville going to the SEC.
If they went that way,
yeah.
Because what some people don't know is the amount of money that Louisville generates.
A lot.
Ridiculous. They're one of the top 20, money-making machines in college sports, and that part of it. I don't think there's any doubt that Louisville could be an SEC school.
They get underestimated because it's just called Louisville. People think of it as a city school, but
you
it's a
know,
bit more than just that.
well, I mean, and they've had a basketball program there for years
Yep.
that has been, outstanding. And even without Rick Pitino, before Rick Pitino, they were good. So Denny Crum had a run there that was pretty amazing. So it is what it is. But I do think that your concept of an Ivy League power conference is a good one, because I think you could do that. You could pull that off. And
They have to have less state oversight as well for
oh yeah,
a lot of these issues coming up with NIL and payments and politicians getting involved. There's a lot less constraints, shall we say?
Yeah, I think that's it. And the other part of the equation is that I was talking to Andy Zimbalist. Andy's the guru of. I strongly recommend anybody who wants to read some things about what's going on in college sports. The Drake Group, which is was exactly the way it sounds, the DRAKE group.org. Andrew Zimbalist is the president of that group. He's also the chief economist at Smith College in Boston. And Andy's brought in by Major League Baseball and football, and Andy was the guy who set the price for the NBA. He was hired to set the price for the NBA whenever they took the Clippers away from Donald Sterling.
Okay.
And so he does. I mean, he's a numbers guy.
Yeah.
He's got, like, I think at last, I'll have to look at my bookcase, because I as a friend, you know how these go. You have to buy everybody's book.
Right.
So I have to go count, but I think it's definitely over 20 that he's done. And I keep saying that. I keep saying, Andy, I've got Christmas gifts to give. How did you write a book this year? But Andy has 20 plus books out there. And he was one of the guys who was heavily involved in the sabermetrics situation for baseball and for all that. So there's a ton, you can find them, folks. Just Google Andrew Zimbalist.
Sounds like he's quite well connected then.
He pretty much knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, he says, because basically college sports is a train wreck. We all know that athletic departments in college are nonprofit. So, the goal in academic, in athletic departments in the university is become, budget neutral, right? You get amount of money, you spend amount of money, and you're basically, that's, anything else you can bring in, that's fine. So there's only at this point in time about 30, 35 universities in this country that actually make a profit in their athletic departments.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of them don't. Now, the goal is not to lose a lot of money, but even if you went through the Big Ten, if you went through the SEC, if you went through, what we call the Power Two now and all the way down the road, right? You would still find people who in the SEC or the Big Ten who still can't run a profitable enterprise in their athletic department. Okay.
Yep.
They screw it up year in and year out. So it's not actually the amount of money you get, which is why we kind of look at this in kind of a way like a promo. It's not set up to be like that, and yet they're doing it. And it's because of that they're usually screwing up. And I mean, people don't realize that the University of Alabama, you would obviously see and say that that's a well-run operation, and it is to an extent, yes, but they still owe, I believe it's like $50 or $60 million on the stadium where they expanded the stadium. So
On Alabama, real quick, if you would you say though that it's worth it when you look at how much they've been able to expand their academic side with because their out of state student numbers have kind of skyrocketed.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying. And if I meant that, if you
No,
think
no, no. I'm just bringing that because that's actually an example I use is Alabama and how schools can actually use the sports side to increase their academic side.
it's and you're right. It's been fantastic. It's not that it's not an investment into what you can do, right? It's just a cost. So that's all I'm bringing up is
Right.
the fact that if even success costs money, and whether you're the New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers in baseball, whether you're the Dallas Cowboys or Green Bay Packers or whomever in professional football, the Golden State Warriors, and Boston Celtics, and Lakers in basketball. There's still you still have to have a budget,
Yes.
and you still have to adhere to that budget because you've got so many different things that have to be done. And I think that people automatically just think, well, okay, well, they're successful, so they're good. Well, yeah, they're good and they're successful, but keeping up with all of that success comes at a price. And expanding a stadium, uh, building a brand new practice facility, all of that comes at a price. And one of the things that hasn't really been brought up, and there's at least 100 different lawsuits that are making their way through the courts, has to do with things like you've got people who you just mentioned going to University of Alabama. You got student activities fees for athletics that have gone up 75% in the last 10 years. So they're paying, yet, and the athletes are coming to the schools, yet they have zero vote in whether or not this team moves from conference A to conference B.
Right.
You have people who are getting injured and not being handled properly by the universities. There's a myriad of things out there. If any of these court cases pop, which that one or two or three of them is going to happen,
Yep.
then the whole thing goes in a whole different direction. And I just think that what we need to do is keep an eye out for what's going on the business side of this, because we see these outrageous and phenomenal numbers that TV is paying, but what we don't see is the athletic departments, are they utilizing the money that they're getting in a responsible and proper way?
And I think you're right on there. And I think that's why we're seeing a change at the commissioner level. We're seeing a Petiti, we're seeing a Yormark, and we're seeing the quick success that they can have. And I think that the unseen aspect of that is probably what you're touching upon is how they can then influence these athletic directors to maybe better operate their athletic departments. And that's going to have to be the future. And some schools have been caught off guard with this situation. If you look at like California and all that they're owing on their stadium, and now the situation that they're in, some of these schools are just a victim of bad timing in this. But that's the other side of it. And there's the people who talk about the separation of the top two maybe. But I think some of the things you're talking about, like with the students' healthcare and rights, they've already set up the autonomy conferences to be able to deal with that to some degree.
Right.
But I think that they'll be doing a push to get even more governance for the autonomous conferences because of the NIL talk has really kind of weakened that autonomy conference's power. So I think that they'll be pushed in the direction you're talking.
Well, we're at a pay for play moment anyway. But here's the thing: what happens is and this will be a part two. We'll come back and do this another time.
Yeah.
But this when they become paid members of the university, that's going to be a bit of a change, because then the next logical thing is going to be a collective bargaining group where they'll have a union of some sort. And then the next thing after that is, how do they fit the healthcare aspect? And that's all of those things are going to turn upside down the way that these athletic departments are run. They're not set for that. And I think that's, if we go back 1962, I think it was, at Colorado, University of Colorado, there was a kid who got hurt and he filed workman's comp. Then they went to court, and Miles Brandt, who was the attorney at that time for the NCAA, who later became the NCAA president, was a lawyer there, and he argued about the athletic scholarship and how the scholarship, handled the injury while in school, but when the kid graduated, that's when it left, their purview. It was at that point, 1962, that they began to use the term, which we now have heard often, student athlete. No one had ever used that term until Miles Brandt brought it into as a legal defense. That he was a student, he was an athlete, he was injured on the campus. The university, because they're giving him a scholarship, did not have a workman's comp claim to it, and that the injury came because he signed a waiver, which was in the scholarship, that protected them from such things. So that was the theory on that, and that was the theory from 62 up until right today.
A fellow contributor of ours on the other show, Mo Envision, he has an idea that you might think highly over, not so much, is that when we go to the employee state of things here, that they'll do them as employees of the conference and not of the schools, and that could help get around the Title IX situation. Whereas if you create employees of any one sport, you'd probably have to do that for all of them. But if it's through the conference, that might not be the case. What do you think on that?
I think Chip Kelly had the plan of maybe taking football and moving it outside of the university, basically saying that I hasten to use the term club sport because that kind of has a totally different connotation to it than what it really is. But I can foresee that. I can foresee them moving football as another, outside the athletic department.
Mm-hmm.
So the athletic department run like a normal athletic department. And then one these is as if they're like semi-pro, minor leagues, whatever you want to call it, situations. Because if you do make athletes employees, then every athlete, whether they're playing squash or tennis or whatever, becomes paid just like the quarterback or the starting guard on the basketball.
Yeah, the way I kind of see it, maybe you get to that point at some time in the future, but they're probably going to want to take this in steps and stages. So football would probably start. I can see you maybe being an employee of the conference as a football player and then a student of the school, so then they can get rid of that student athlete moniker.
Right.
And so then maybe technically speaking, when they're working this out on papers, that the conference is actually paying the tuition, paying the scholarship. And so that way it all still happens on university. It all still happens the same ways it feels for everybody, but just kind of technically on the books. There's a different way of covering it. So that way these guys would be covered for health care and everything going afterwards.
Yeah, it's going to come down to Congress deciding what they're going to do, which scares me. But I do think that we'll find out. But you're right. I think it's going to be a stepped process.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot. I think what we all want to do is just sit down and watch whomever is our favorite, college football team play, and not have to worry about all of this craziness. But I'm contractually obligated to talk about it and to pay attention to it. But the business of sports is just that. It is a business, and regardless of whether or not, we're talking going all the way up from Little League baseball to the pro. it's there, and you may not want to look at it that way, and you may want to just sit there and not pay attention to anything but the game, which is fine. But there's things going on here behind us with the amount of money that which I also believe that we've capped out on. I don't think we're going to see any more big TV contracts again. I think this one was the last of the big ones, because I think that we're now looking at being more selective in where the money's going to be spent, and we've had a course correction in sports television where the money is just you can't go and do what John Skipper did when John was, and not just John, but other people along that, where you just write checks with silly amounts on it because you want that conference or you want that sport, whatever that sport may be, to be yours, and you don't want even for 1 minute for the league to even have to think about a second partner. And I think that those days are long since past.
I think the regular season rush is over because that's a way too much supply and not enough demand in terms of number of channels to be put on. But I think postseason growth is going to be huge. And Dennis Dodd did an article on that I have pinned on my Twitter because I think that is so important.
Yeah.
Is the growth in the postseason is going to be tremendous, and that will fuel. So that's where it's kind of hard to talk to people like, how do we go from possibly 20 onwards even more? Well, that's going to have to come from postseason growth. And until we get some type of clarification from the CFP, it's kind of hard to dive into, but that's where I'd probably see it at.
Yeah, it's going to take a while, that's for sure. Well, look, thanks for coming by. Greatly appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me on, man. It was
my
good
pleasure.
to talk with a guy like you. It's a little different talking with you about this than a lot of the guys I normally do with, because you have such a broader range of knowledge in terms of the business side of it.
I'm older, so that's how it works. But no, it's been, I'll tell you what, the business of sports from the time I got into it, I'll give you one quick thing. In 1979, I was working for a company. We were going for the Florida State University football rights, and I paid. I say I paid. The company I worked for, Hootie Ingram was the athletic director at Florida State, and I was authorized to go as high as $100,000 for the football rights to the university, to Florida State University. And we went out to dinner, and I told Hootie what the deal was. He said, "Okay, so let me think about it." And so I kind of excused myself and went over to the bar and watched some basketball and came back. And Hootie said, "Okay, I'll sign the deal." So we basically got the deal for all of Florida State's football rights for a year for $100,000. That wouldn't get you in. That wouldn't get you a game now from any.
Might get you hung up on.
Yeah, it might get you. It's like, what, are you embarrassing me? Yeah, we won't put the band out there for $2,400,000.
Oh, how times change.
It does. So life has changed drastically. But anyway, thanks again for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. We'll have you back soon, and have a lovely day. And folks, I hope you enjoyed it. My pleasure.
We'll look forward to it next time. Have yourself a good one, Jim.
You too. Take care, and we're going to close the show now. Everybody have a nice day. We'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday's edition. Take care.